New overnight, Donald Trump detonates into a 1 a.m. rant after learning the Epstein Files are officially moving forward. The meltdown was immediate.
Congress forces Trump's hand. The Epstein Files Transparency Act is now law. The release countdown has begun.
Meanwhile, Fox News' own polling shows Trump in a historic freefall, with economic sentiment hitting rock bottom.
Okay, hold on. Stop whatever you're doing, because this is not normal. It's not routine. It's not Trump being Trump. What unfolded in the last few hours is the political equivalent of pulling a fire alarm in the dead of night, because Donald Trump just had a 1 a.m. meltdown so loud, so frantic, and so revealing that it practically confirmed everything his team has been terrified of since the moment he signed the Epstein Files law. And yes, he signed it. He didn't want to. He fought it. He publicly raged about it, but Congress boxed him in. The votes were veto-proof, and he caved. And the second he realized what that actually meant, he erupted. And here's the part that should make everyone sit up. The meltdown wasn't some vague rant. It wasn't a random insult at a late-night comedian, although he somehow found time to go after Jimmy Kimmel, which honestly tells you everything. No, this rant was triggered by one thing: movement, real movement. For the first time, the Epstein Files are not a hypothetical, not a bill stuck in committee, not a performative stunt. They are law. They are active, and federal agencies have now started the countdown to forced disclosure. Trump knows it, his lawyers know it, and the entire right-wing media machine is pretending they don't see what's coming.
Okay, hold on. But here's the twist. While all of this was happening, while Trump was spiraling online at 1 a.m., the Justice Department and multiple agencies were already preparing internal briefings on what must be released, what cannot legally be withheld, and what previous administrations, including Trump's own, attempted to classify, reroute, bury, or delay. And that, more than anything, explains the meltdown. Because for Trump, this isn't just about Epstein. It's about who was involved, who visited whom, what meetings happened, what favors were granted, and which names appear in categories he cannot spin, hide, or shout down. And yes, stay with me here, because that's not even the wildest part. While Trump was boiling over online, Fox News quietly dropped new polling showing him underwater on every major metric: affordability, economic trust, national security, even basic job approval. But instead of acknowledging any of that, Trump posted smiling photos with Saudi royals and tech billionaires in what looked like an alternate reality where the country isn't facing the worst affordability crisis in a generation. Americans are struggling to pay for groceries. Turkey prices, beef prices, coffee prices, all up. But Trump wants you to know he's hanging out with the Saudi royal family and Elon Musk. Completely normal, right? Except here's the contradiction that's about to blow everything open. Trump is insisting publicly that everything is fine, that polls are fake, that the economy is booming, and that the Epstein files mean nothing. But privately, and this is according to multiple people in his orbit, his team is scrambling. Why? Because the forced release of federal documents means they lose control. There's no spin, there's no executive privilege, there's no hiding behind Bill Barr or some MAGA federal judge. The law is the law.
Okay, hold on. Let's be clear. Here's the part that really matters. And yeah, this is wild. The meltdown at 1 a.m. wasn't random noise. It wasn't Trump just venting. It was a pressure release valve after a day that cornered him on 3 different fronts: legally, politically, and financially. And when Trump gets boxed in on all 3 at the same time, we see the same pattern over and over: a frantic late-night rant, usually aimed at the lowest-hanging target he can find. Kimmel, Fox, fake news, pollsters, whoever happens to be on screen. But beneath the insults, you can always trace the real trigger if you pay attention. And this time, the trigger is unmistakable. For the first time in 8 years, Trump has absolutely no control over the Epstein files. And that's what makes this moment different from any of his past scandals. Trump has always relied on 2 things to manage political fallout: control and chaos. He either controls the narrative or he creates so much chaos that the narrative gets buried. But the Epstein Files Transparency Act doesn't care about his chaos strategy. It doesn't care about his truth social rants or his midnight tantrums. The law exists, the clock is ticking, and the agencies responsible for compliance have no choice but to move forward. There's no executive privilege left to invoke. There's no Bill Barr to quietly smother it. There's no Trump-loyal OLC memo telling them to stall until the news cycle changes. It's happening whether Trump likes it or not. And here's where this gets uncomfortable for him. The bill requires the release of unclassified federal records related to Epstein, his network, his operations, his flights, his associates, his visitors, his correspondence, and the people who were aware of or connected to those systems. That includes people from multiple administrations: Clinton's, Bush's, Obama's, and yes, Trump's. This isn't a Democrats are coming after Trump moment. This is the federal government is about to release documents from every administration, including his moment, which is exactly why he's spiraling. Because think about the coincidence in timing. He signs the bill, and within hours, he's online raging at Jimmy Kimmel, of all people. Why? Because public figures often aim at easy targets when they're trying to deflect from the thing they can't spin. It's political muscle memory for him. The problem is that this time the easy target strategy isn't working. His base didn't rally behind the Kimmel rant. Even some conservatives shrugged it off. And conservative commentators who normally leap to defend him were noticeably quiet. They know what the signing of the Epstein Files Act means. They know this is not a safe terrain for Trump. They know the optics are catastrophic.
But that's not even the biggest issue, because while Trump was shouting into the void online, Fox News was quietly airing poll numbers that might as well have been a political obituary. When Fox, not CNN, not MSNBC, Fox shows that 76% of Americans think the economy is headed in the wrong direction, that 60% rate their personal financial situation as fair or poor, and that trust in Trump's handling of affordability is collapsing, that's not a partisan hit job. That's a warning flare. Fox knows its audience. It knows what Republican voters respond to. And when those numbers drop on Trump's desk, the same night he's forced to sign a disclosure bill tied to one of the most radioactive names in modern history, you get exactly what we saw at 1 a.m. And Trump, in classic Trump fashion, tried to counter the bad polling by posting photos with Saudi royals and billionaires, as if anyone in America struggling to pay for groceries is thinking, wow, I'm glad Trump had a great night in Riyadh. It was one of the most tone-deaf attempts at damage control he's done in years. Americans are rationing groceries. Food bank lines are the longest they've been in a decade. Turkey prices have spiked year after year. Coffee, beef, bananas, bread, all up, all hitting families where it hurts. And Trump's response? A photo op with the Saudi royal family.
But the part they don't want you to notice is this. Trump's public mood on any given night is almost always directly connected to something legally happening behind closed doors that day. And the timing here isn't subtle. Agencies began preparing for the Epstein Files release this week. Internal memos went out. Lawyers were assigned to document review. Deadlines were circulated. Trump's inner circle knows this. They know what's in some of those documents. They know what federal investigators found years ago but couldn't publicly release. Trump's team has been trying to get ahead of this moment for weeks. They pushed vague narratives online. They floated conspiracy theories to muddy the waters. They tried to frame the whole thing as deep state targeting. But the problem is that the bill is bipartisan. It's not Democrats versus Trump. It's Congress versus secrecy. It's transparency versus cover-ups. There is no partisan shield this time. And here's where this gets even more interesting. Trump's meltdown didn't just coincide with the Epstein Files timeline, it also aligned with new reporting that his DOJ, during his presidency, may have improperly interfered in certain maritime strike decisions related to operations near Venezuela. A senior lawyer at U.S. Southern Command reportedly warned that the strikes could constitute unlawful killings, and instead of listening to military counsel, Trump's DOJ allegedly overrode them. Whether the reporting is fully accurate or just emerging, it's enough to put Trump's legal team on edge. And when Trump's legal team is on edge, Trump lashes out publicly. It's predictable, but it's also revealing.
But think about the political cost of this cluster of events. Trump is facing collapsing polls, a transparency law he can't control, and a DOJ record that's going to get picked apart as new revelations come in. And at the same time, he's launching public attacks on entertainers, ranting about TV ratings, and posting glamour shots with billionaires. It's not strength. It's not strategy. It's a man cornered by events that have finally moved beyond his reach. And yet the strangest part is the silence coming from the Republican leadership. Normally, they scramble to defend him. They push counter talking points. They flood the airwaves with sympathetic spin. They create alternative storylines. But this time, almost nothing. A few lukewarm statements, a couple of generic witch hunt comments, but no full mobilization, no coordinated defense. Why? Because the Epstein Files Act isn't a partisan issue. It's a bipartisan landmine. And no Republican wants to step on it. They don't know what the documents contain. They don't know how many names appear. They don't know where the political fallout will land. And the last thing they want is to tie themselves to a disclosure process that could implicate donors, allies, or party insiders. What's even more revealing is that Trump's meltdown happened right after his team realized that the agencies handling the Epstein files are not delaying. They're not dragging their feet. They're looking for no excuses. They're following the law. And Trump has no lever to pull to stop it. He can rage, he can post, he can complain, he can attack comedians. None of it changes the deadline.
And yeah, this is wild. Trump's entire political identity is built on the idea that rules don't apply to him, that laws are negotiable, that procedures can be bent if you push hard enough, that institutions will fold under pressure. But this time the law is mechanical. The release process is automatic. There is no Trump exception. And that's why he snapped at 1 a.m. He knows what losing control looks like, and this, right now, is it. And we're only at the beginning. Because the moment those documents start hitting the public sphere, the political world shifts, the media shifts, public perception shifts, and Trump's team won't be able to spin it. They can't pre-bury information they don't control. They can't discredit federal releases mandated by bipartisan law. They can't suppress what gets filed publicly. And the meltdown you saw at 1 a.m., that was the warm-up. And here's the part Trump really didn't want anyone to notice. The first wave of internal agency briefings tied to the Epstein files began circulating before he even signed the bill. That's how inevitable this was. Staffers inside Justice, State, DHS, and even the intelligence community were told to prepare inventories of records related to the case. And when that happens, when bureaucratic machinery starts moving without Trump, he panics. He always panics when he's not in control of the procedure. What's interesting is how quickly this moved from legislative victory to operational reality. Usually when Congress passes a transparency bill, there's a delay, a multi-month implementation period, some back and forth with agencies about compliance timelines. Not here. The bipartisan revolt forced an accelerated timeline, and agencies were already doing preliminary assessments. Trump found out, and he snapped. It's that simple. This wasn't a theoretical concern for him. It was real, immediate, unavoidable movement.
And the meltdown at 1 a.m. wasn't even the first sign. Hours earlier, Trump reportedly demanded a call with select DOJ advisors after learning that the initial review of the Epstein documents included records from 2017 to 2021 that his own administration handled. Let that sink in. He tried to find out which documents might touch his presidency before the public ever sees them. That alone tells you everything, because if he believed the documents would exonerate him, he'd be celebrating the release. He'd be bragging about it. He'd be saying, see, total vindication. But that's not what happened. What happened was panic. What happened was frantic calls. What happened was late-night rage posts. And what happened was a visibly shaken team trying to get ahead of something they don't control. And meanwhile, Fox News, the only network he counts on to soften bad news for him, was broadcasting numbers that should scare any political strategist. Not just the raw polling, but the underlying sentiment, the trend lines, the demographics. Trump is losing ground with suburban voters, independent voters, working class voters, even older voters who usually stick with him through anything. The affordability crisis is drowning him. He can't spin grocery prices. He can't spin rent increases. He can't spin the feeling people have that everything costs more and wages aren't keeping up. And what made the polling segment so painful wasn't the numbers. It was the tone. Fox didn't sugarcoat it. They didn't frame it as Biden's failure. They didn't pivot to Hunter Biden. They just delivered the data, straight. And for Trump, that's betrayal.
That's why he immediately tried to change the subject online. He went after Kimmel. He posted about pollsters supposedly telling him he's more popular than George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. He posted photos with Saudi billionaires like he was living in a parallel universe. It was desperation masquerading as bravado. When he's winning, he talks about winning. When he's losing, he talks about irrelevant metrics and imaginary compliments. And here's where the politics get even more volatile. Republicans in Congress don't want to touch the Epstein Files issue because it's politically radioactive. Democrats, meanwhile, are quietly preparing statements for when the first documents drop.
And independents, the voters who swing elections, are watching all of this unfold with increasing distrust towards Trump's emotional volatility. A president melting down at 1 a.m. about a late-night comedian while simultaneously trying to deflect from a transparency law he was forced to sign? That's not strength. That's not leadership. That's fear. And that fear is justified because beyond the Epstein files themselves is a broader pattern emerging. Every institution Trump used to control or manipulate is now acting independently. The courts are issuing rulings his team didn't anticipate. Agencies are making decisions he can't stop. Polling organizations he once bullied into compliance are reporting brutal numbers. Financial markets tied to his ventures are collapsing. Trump media stock drop alone wiped out billions in paper wealth. And even the AI investments Trump has been boasting about publicly are facing increasing scrutiny, with companies like NVIDIA clarifying that the massive AI pact Trump bragged about may not even be finalized. That's not momentum. That's not stability. That's unraveling.
And what makes all of this dangerous for Trump is that his political identity depends on projecting control. The moment he looks out of control, the entire foundation cracks. Because his base doesn't support him because he's polite or steady or predictable. They support him because he sells the idea that he alone can fix things. But at this moment, he can't fix anything. He can't even control the narrative. The law is the law, the polls are the polls, the documents are the documents. And no amount of late-night yelling changes that. And the people around him know this. They see the internal memos. They see the polling crosstabs. They see the economic sentiment surveys. They see the DOJ anxieties. They see the agency briefings that reference dates and names and sealed logs. And even if none of the documents implicate Trump personally, the perception that he's terrified of them itself is politically devastating. Because perception drives narrative. Narrative drives coverage. Coverage drives polls, and polls drive donor confidence. And donor confidence drives the viability of political survival. That's the chain reaction Trump is currently losing control over. And then there's the international angle, which barely anyone is talking about yet. Trump's meeting with the Saudis wasn't just a friendly visit. It came at a time when multiple allies are watching how the U.S. handles transparency and accountability. The release of the Epstein files will be scrutinized by foreign governments too, especially those with high net worth individuals who appeared in Epstein's orbit. Trump posting photos with those same international actors at the exact moment he's forced into domestic transparency is an optics disaster. Even Republican strategists admitted privately that the timing could not possibly have been worse.
And this is where the puzzle pieces start connecting. Trump's meltdown wasn't triggered by one event. It was triggered by the overlap of three simultaneous threats: the political threat from the polling, the legal threat from the Epstein files, and the reputational threat from his increasingly bizarre public behavior. And when you add the fact that agencies are preparing for document release without interference, you get the perfect storm he's currently drowning in. That's why his team is lashing out at minor targets. That's why his allies are suddenly quiet. That's why the meltdown was so immediate and so aggressive. Because he can't stop the release. He can't spin the law. He can't hide the documents. And he can't control the agencies. And the moment Trump senses he's losing power, real power, he collapses into rage, protection, and denial. But the part no one seems prepared for is what happens once these documents actually start dropping. Because when they do, the entire conversation will shift overnight. Reporters will be combing through details. Analysts will be connecting dots. Records that were quietly discussed for years will be scanned, published, indexed, and dissected. And Trump's team will be in the worst possible position, reactive, not proactive, behind the news cycle, not ahead of it. That is lethal for political survival. And here's the twist no one is saying out loud yet. Trump's meltdown suggests he believes something in those documents threatens him. Maybe not directly, maybe not criminally, but politically. And political vulnerability is the one thing Trump has never learned to handle. When he's cornered, he lashes out. When he's exposed, he distracts. When he's powerless, he panics. We saw the panic at 1 a.m. We saw the distraction in the Saudi photos. We saw the deflection in the attack on Kimmel. And we're about to see something even more extreme once those documents start to surface, because the meltdown you saw wasn't the peak. It was the first crack. And the pressure behind that crack is only going to build. And here's where this whole thing takes a turn that Trump's team absolutely did not anticipate, because while they were scrambling to contain the political damage, something else started unfolding in the background. Something far more consequential than a bad Fox segment or late-night rant. The financial markets tied to Trump's empire were reacting too.
Trump media's stock, already on life support, continued plunging, and you can trace that drop directly to the perception of instability around Trump himself. Investors don't want chaos. They don't want unpredictability. They don't want a founder who's up at 1 a.m. raging about late-night comedians while regulators prepare forced disclosures connected to one of the most explosive scandals of the last 2 decades. That's not leadership. That's not confidence. That's a liability. And this is the part that should worry him the most, because unlike political supporters who will excuse, dismiss, or rationalize anything he does, investors don't care about loyalty. They care about stability. And when they see a political figure unraveling publicly, they back away. So when Trump's meltdown coincided with the Epstein File movement, polling collapse, and bizarre Saudi self-promotion, the market responded in the only way markets know. They punished him. The billionaire image he's tried to cultivate is cracking under the weight of actual numbers. Not slogans, not rallies, not applause lines. Numbers.
Trump can tweet about being more popular than Washington and Lincoln, but the share price of Trump media dropping below the SPAC baseline is reality, and you can't spin reality, at least not in markets. And the perception that he's spiraling makes everything worse. Donors get nervous, investors pull back, political PACs slow their spending, and operatives avoid tying themselves to instability. And instability is exactly what his meltdown projected. But what's fascinating, in a deeply ironic way, is that all of this could have been avoided if Trump had just treated the Epstein Files law like any other transparency measure. Sign it, move on, let the agencies do their job, stay out of the spotlight, act confident. Instead, he did the opposite. He made the release seem like a personal threat. He made the meltdown seem connected to the bill. And in politics, perception becomes meaning. Meaning becomes narrative. Narrative becomes truth for millions of voters. And the truth forming right now is simple. Trump is terrified of something in those files. Even if the files contain nothing damaging to him personally, the panic suggests otherwise. And voters respond to signals more than facts. A confident leader doesn't melt down at 1 a.m. A confident leader doesn't pick fights with comedians. A confident leader doesn't need imaginary pollsters telling him he's more popular than George Washington. A confident leader doesn't post billionaire photo ops during a national affordability crisis. A confident leader doesn't beg the public to believe that everything is fine when every indicator shows the opposite.
And here's the part that really matters. The informant, who's been sourcing shady deals to Trump's family for years, is also the one providing the documents to the House Oversight Committee. And yeah, this is wild. And if you want to understand how politically devastating this is, look at the reaction from his allies in Congress. Silence. Strategic silence. No coordinated defense, no unified message, no synchronized spin. That silence isn't apathy, it's calculation. When Republicans go quiet, it's because they don't know where the fallout will land. They don't know whose name might appear in the documents. They don't know whether their own donors, strategists, or political allies are implicated. And the danger for Trump is that his meltdown makes it look like he suspects the worst. And here's something even more telling. Conservative influencers, the ones who usually leap onto every Trump narrative, didn't amplify his 1 a.m. rant. They tiptoed around it. They reposted other stories. They dodged questions. They kept their distance because even they recognized the political risk of defending someone who clearly reacted out of fear, not strength. That's how you know this moment is different. And the backdrop to all of this is the ongoing affordability crisis crushing Americans. Families can't keep up with grocery prices, rent, utilities, student loans, credit card interest, car insurance, all rising. Meanwhile, Trump's out there talking about ventilators, bragging about imaginary polls, and posing with Saudi royalty. It's the kind of disconnect that used to be a footnote in a campaign. But in today's economic climate, it's political poison. People don't want theatrics. They want stability. And Trump delivered the least stable reaction possible.
The kicker is that the Epstein Files release isn't even the only crisis quietly building behind the scenes. There were ongoing investigations, unresolved court actions, lingering DOJ concerns, and the possibility of new political blowback if the Southern Command reporting gains traction. If even a fraction of those allegations, that Trump's DOJ overrode lawful military counsel on strike operations, turn out to be true, that becomes a separate narrative entirely.
not connected to Epstein, not connected to polling, not connected to the economy. A standalone scandal with potentially serious implications. And Trump knows this. His legal team knows this. The Republican establishment knows this, which is why they're keeping their distance. Not in loud resignation, but in quiet avoidance. That's always the first sign of political distancing. Silence. The louder the meltdown, the quieter the allies. And right now, his allies are almost silent. But the true breaking point, the thing that will determine whether this meltdown becomes a one-night embarrassment or a defining political collapse, comes when the documents actually begin to roll out. Because once they do, the story will no longer be under Trump's control. Reporters will take over. Analysts will take over. The public will take over. And Trump's posts, his distractions, his attempts to create counter-narratives won't matter. The documents will speak louder than him. That's the part he fears most. And that's why the meltdown won't be the last. It was the first, the opening signal, the early warning tremor before the quake. Because everything he built politically, the persona of invincibility, the aura of dominance, the myth of control, depends on the illusion that he always knows more than the public, that he always has leverage, that he always has an escape hatch.
But this situation has no escape hatch. The release is mandated. The agencies must comply. The courts will enforce deadlines. Congress will monitor the process. The media will amplify every new detail. And Trump will be watching from the sidelines, powerless to stop it. And the irony, the dark twist in all of this, is that Trump has spent years demanding transparency from his enemies, accusing others of corruption, calling for disclosure of everything under the sun. But when the spotlight shifts even slightly toward him, even indirectly, we get a 1 a.m. meltdown, frantic deflection, collapsing polls, investor panic, and complete silence from his own allies. So if this is what Trump looks like before the documents drop, imagine what happens after, because the meltdown wasn't the story.